Welcome to Forging Resilience, exploring for a different perspective on strength and leadership. Join me as we discuss experiences and stories with guests to help gain fresh insights around challenge, success, and leadership.
So today I have the privilege of sitting with Ross Tomkins on Forging Resilience. He's a mentor, an investor, and co-founder of Alphagenics. Ross, welcome to the show, bud.
Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, really looking forward to it.
Likewise, buddy. Rather than car crash your career or your story, mate, give us a rundown of what's relevant for you and for the listeners from right back when you started off in physiotherapy and leads you to be sat as a mentor and an investor today, mate, running this company, Alphagenics.
Brilliant. Yeah. So I guess the key thing is healthcare. You know, healthcare came right through my career from where it started and to where it is today. When I was a kid, I loved sport. I loved the way the human body worked. I loved tennis. I loved football. I was never good enough at either of those to pursue that. And it was my own physiotherapist that said, your knees are a bit dodgy. And I thought, your job seems quite interesting. And that led me on to university, physiotherapy, then started my own business when the NHS didn't give me what I needed. I wanted to spend hours with patients, really getting to know them, what was the root cause, and not just, stick a Band-Aid on someone and give them a couple of exercises, send them away. So I spent a very short time in the NHS, then went into the private sector, ultimately, realised I didn't like doing what I was told. I wanted to be my own boss. So started my own business back in 2006. We grew that up to 35 members of staff, not all full-time. And we grew it in the world of occupational health. That led on to a desire to learn less about medicine and more about business. So I started throwing myself into marketing. I realised, I could be the best physiotherapist in the world, but if nobody knew who I was, how would my business grow? So I spent a lot of time learning about marketing. And that then led to the revelation that even small businesses could grow through acquisition. So I started learning about how to raise capital, how to appeal to investors, mergers, acquisitions. And since then, we've done 18 acquisitions over the last 5 years, most of them still health related. Alphagenics is a startup. So as if we didn't have enough to do with the acquisitions, we also started Alphagenics nearly 3 years ago. It's my passion, I would say. It's the men's health company. But then around that, we've got this ecosystem of other health businesses. We have a medical supplies and pharmaceuticals business, a medical device company, a domiciliary care company, a health and safety company, that all orbit in what we call our healthcare ecosystem.
Yeah, fascinating, mate. And which ones in terms of that ecosystem do you see as the biggest? How can I put this? That transitions people from one company to the next towards Alphagenics. Given and give us a little overview of what Alphagenics is as well, pal.
So all of the businesses are not necessarily directly related, although we do share some resource. How I position this in my mind, if you like, is because I was a physiotherapist for a long time. If you asked me who I was, I would tell you I was a physiotherapist. It was more than a job. It was my identity for a long time. And I remember I came home from work one day, and I was still doing a day a week. This was about 6 years ago. And my wife said, "How was your day today?" I said, "I've not been the best physiotherapist I could be today." She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, my patient didn't know, but I was thinking about the contract review meeting we had coming up. I was thinking about the offer we just made on this other business. I didn't give them my all. I didn't give them my best." And that was the day I realised I needed to hang up my physio gloves and focus more on the business. So that was sort of the transition. And the reframe in my brain that I mentioned was, rather than trading time for money, rather than fixing one person at a time. So I used to love it. If you came in to see me and you had a bad knee and you left and your knee wasn't painful anymore, I loved that feeling. It's a great win. the reframing I've had to go through was an understanding that although I no longer put my hands on a person, our businesses are helping thousands of people every day. So our medical supplies company sells stethoscopes and scalpels and PPE to hospitals all over the country that in turn are helping thousands of people every day. Our medical device company sells microscopy that helps hematology and pathology and anything that ends in ology, really. We look at tiny things that could help, and I'm not saying this is definitely what was going to happen, but that could help solve cancer or fix something huge, which our medical devices are involved with. Our home healthcare company, our domiciliary care company, we have 75 staff. We're looking after hundreds of people every day and improving the quality of life for them and their families. Our men's health company, Alphagenics, which we'll come on to and talk more about, we're helping men become the best version of themselves every day. So although I'm no longer putting my hands on someone, I have this ripple effect through all of those companies that we're literally helping thousands of people every single day.
Yeah. So from what I'm hearing is you've that insight or that moment that your wife asked you that question, you were able to zoom out and recognize that, rather than help one, there's lots of other ways that you can affect people and their health and their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good point you mentioned there, because what I realized was I'm better at zooming out. I can usually make sense of complex things quickly and make it easy to understand for somebody. I'm very good at connecting the dots. So where some people will see a jumble and don't know where to go, I'm like, we'll do that, and that, and this will happen. So I'm good up here. I'm actually not very good down here. I'm not a very good manager. I get bored very easily. I hate filling in spreadsheets. But I am good at motivating and inspiring, and I'm good at connecting the dots where other people might see a complex mess. So when I realized that, and I realized we should hire people better than me at doing those other things, it allowed our business to flourish. And that's where things really took off.
Do you miss that contact with the patient and those sorts of relationships and being able to get that nice feeling when they walk out without pain?
For a while I did. Yeah, definitely. Because I think it was still part of my identity. Over the last couple of years, though, honestly, no. And that's because I still get fulfillment from the other things we do. So whether that's, a men's health company, when guys text every week, we get text messages saying, oh my God, I feel 20 years younger. I'm a better father. I'm a better husband. I'm more patient with my children. I'm more present as a husband. We get those comments every week. So I still get that feeling. And also, I do mentor other business owners as well. And the moment when someone goes, I get it. And, all of a sudden with their business, and we've had people that their business has doubled, trebled, quadrupled. And I get that feeling again from those moments and relationships.
Awesome. Mate, so going on to something that we just mentioned briefly before we came on to record, the spirituality and leadership, and that you've just mentioned that, who were you? It was Ross, the physiotherapist. If I were to ask you who are you today, what would bring up for you?
Oh, that's a really good question, Aaron. I probably still haven't quite worked that out. If I'm being totally truthful, I would love to give you this bulletproof answer. I'm still figuring it out. I'm an author. I'm an investor. I'm a business owner. We own multiple companies. We're soon going to be in 3 different countries. So I haven't quite figured out how to describe that yet. In all honesty.
No, there's no worries, man. I apologize if that was a slight not over the head, but you know what I mean? If off guard, I think is a better question. But it's something that is really interesting for me. And a mate that we've got in common, Brendan, recommended me a book a while ago called The Ultimate Coach. And it's a book about being, not doing. And it's, sometimes when you read something, it's just the right time to have certain insights. This is one of those books, and it talked about those sorts of things. I completely get what you're saying. And for me personally, who am I today is continuously evolving, but I have almost like an aspirational list of who I want to be. And there's a lot of there's not things in there, it's feelings, emotions, and states, which
100%
I live
agree.
to aspire into. It's not a concrete contract today, it's to an aspiring list.
Yeah, exactly the same. And I think the book for me, which sounds similar, is Key Person of Influence. So a guy called Daniel Priestley was really one of the first people that influenced, I guess, my business career. Same thing, it's about who do you want to be? And, I've had that book in my mind, and I've met Daniel several times and chatted to him and read all of his books, and I still quite haven't got, to that point. But to your point there, it's about who am I on a daily basis? Am I presenting my best self to my family, to our clients, to my wife? And as long as I can honestly say, yes, I'm trying my hardest, then I'm quite happy.
Yeah. No, I was wondering if Daniel Priestley was in your mind because of the ecosystem. I've listened to some brilliant podcasts talking about business. Probably the one that stands out for me is with Chris Doe from the Future. I'm not sure if you've listened to that one. A marketing guy, really interesting. But yeah, he doesn't like talking about funnels. I don't want you to funnel my granny. He talks about gifts and certain layers, and so I really like his language around business.
Yeah. But Daniel actually, so it was one of his first books, and he talked in there that he'd acquired a competitor. So it was him that first led me on to acquisition. And I learned from his mentor, who's a guy called Jeremy Harbour. So he was the first person I started learning from 7 years ago. And then that's completely changed the trajectory of my business and my personal life.
Well, what does spirituality mean to you, Ross, at the moment?
I think for me, it's belief in a higher power. It's an understanding that everything is connected in some way. So whether somebody calls it God, whether someone calls it the universe, whether someone calls it the one, I think an acceptance that we're all connected, everything that we do on a daily basis has a repercussion. Whether we call it, other people call it nature, that for me is what spirituality is. It's this idea that you and I are connected somehow, and how we live our life directly affects all of us.
Mate, there's a really cool picture over your right shoulder, which I don't use the video, but of a samurai. What's the significance of that picture, if I may ask?
So the samurai were, they ruled in the Edo period in Japan for hundreds of years, and they ruled with an iron fist. But the Bushido, the way of Bushido had a lot of similarities with our noble knights back in the medieval times. And a lot of what they stood for, I believe in, and it's humbleness, it's courage, it's looking after the weak, and all of these things. I think if the world was more like that, the world would be a better place. Now, someone will always say, yes, but they chopped people's heads off, and if anyone got out of hand, they killed them, and I get that. But fundamentally, Bushido and this idea of courage, humbleness, humility, taking care of the weak, I think is a really great way to live your life.
Yeah, is that something that you try and build into your business or your days, weeks, and months, mate?
It is, yeah. I think I'm helped by the fact that naturally, I think I am that way. I think, all of us have an innate nature. Some people have to learn and train and coach in certain things more than others. Like, I think it comes easy for me to put other people's views and thoughts before my own. And all of our businesses, because we're in healthcare, we are sort of heart-led, quite empathetic. We're trying to change people's lives, whether that is through a medical device or a service.
And going to the link then, or the dots between the connection between spirituality and leadership. What is? I ask you this because it's up on LinkedIn as well. You've put that. What is that connection or relationship to, mate?
I think I love the saying that you can't build a skyscraper on the foundations of a bungalow. I think it's very difficult to be a leader if you don't fully understand yourself. And spirituality for me is the doorway to help you understand yourself. So the happier you are in your own skin, that the more you understand why you react certain ways and you act the way you are, I think it's easier to step into your power. It's easier to be a leader. It's easier to manage other people when you're happy with who you are. If you're fighting with your own demons all the time, I think it's very difficult to be successful, for want of a better word.
Would you mind sharing us something that's relevant that you're happy to in terms of your insights in that you've learnt when you've got to understand yourself better and developed more of a connection to yourself and those around you, mate?
I think when you believe that we are all connected, the universe is one, it's quite humbling. Then you don't take yourself too seriously anymore. We're just a tiny part of a huge story that's unfolding all the time. And when you don't take yourself too seriously, I think that really does help you then be the best version of yourself every day, to make good decisions, and generally do the right thing by everybody.
And is there something you've learnt that's really interesting that you're happy to share about on here, mate? So if I give you an example then, so something that I've learnt through being mentored, through getting coached, through asking myself some questions, taking time to reflect, to journal, to meditate, is a desperate need, or a once very, very strong need to prove myself to the world, to do difficult, dangerous, challenging things, because the assumption was there was acceptance the other side. It was my version of trying to become successful. And I felt I didn't have the intellect to do that, but I did have the physical capacity to do that. So that's what I lent into, which saw me pass out of the Royal Marines, join Special Forces, race Ironman distances and mountain biking, and try and nudge that. And obviously, as you know, we never really find what we're looking for in the things that we don't really need. So that was one of my biggest realizations. It's the cleaning of that lens and perception that actually I'm absolutely fine as I am. That is still a driver, and it's still to this day. I don't want to say it has to be put in check, but I have to be very conscious of it. So if we take a list of tasks for something as simple as that, if I've got 10 things to do, what ones does my ego tell me I want to do, the needy little boy, and what ones really is going to tip the scale, and when is enough? And the laptop gets closed, I go back to the kids. So that's like an insight that I've had through being able to connect to myself and all that discomfort.
Yeah, I think, one of the realizations for me was, why do we do things? Probably similar to what you've said there. So what motivates us? Why do we do the things we do? And probably the defining moment for that was during COVID. So during COVID, I spent many years, working on myself and what drove me and why I grew my business and all those things. And during COVID, I was in Dubai with business when Dubai turned red, which for people that aren't familiar with that, what that meant is that you couldn't fly back to the UK without going into a quarantine hotel. But one of the many crazy things about the world that happened at that time was there was always a workaround. So I could go to a green country that allowed me in, and I chose Costa Rica. So I remember I flew from Dubai via Germany. Everyone who got off in Germany had to wear a mask and had to have a test. I was allowed to transit through Hanover without wearing a mask, without having a test, and fly to Costa Rica. I had like 9 hours in the airport in Germany, where nobody challenged me for not wearing a mask because I was allowed to, even though everyone else had one on, because I was traveling to Costa Rica. It was crazy. But I flew to Costa Rica and I went to a health retreat, which specialized in using ayahuasca. So ayahuasca, for those that haven't come across it, is a powerful psychedelic. It comes from the vine that grows in the Amazon when it's combined with another plant that grows next to it. And during this experience, and we did 3 of them in a week, I met Mother Nature. And that's going to sound crazy to people that, I haven't experienced this type of thing, but I met what I interpreted to be Mother Nature, that the universe, the one, the supreme being, whatever you want to call it. And I asked her if I was a good parent. And she said, no, not.
Oof.
And I was crushed. I remember crying my eyes out, sitting in this structure in the jungle in Costa Rica. And I had all of these visions of when I had been in my office and my kids had come in and I'd said, go away, I'm on a meeting, and shunning my children. And this realization that I'd always told myself I was going to work really hard and probably retire when I was younger and then I could spend time with my kids. But my kids at that time were already almost teenagers. They were 10 and 12 at this time. And this understanding of what I was working for hit me like a ton of bricks. And I remember saying to this being, is it too late? And she said, it's never too late. So I feel quite emotional, but I came home and totally changed. So my outlook on life from that moment forward changed, and I've taken my kids to school every day pretty much since then, unless I'm out of the country. With the first couple of years after I came back, before it was not the done thing and they didn't want it anymore, I would still put them to bed and read them the story and tickle their back or whatever. And now they're like, Dad, get lost. But it totally changed my outlook on life and, what was important to me. And I realized, my family was what I was doing this for. So I had to reprioritize things. I don't know if I quite answered your question there, but that was
100% you have, mate. What you shared there is really powerful, and thank you for that. I know it's not easy, and I can sense that emotion as a father as well. I have those moments as well. So I sense the weight of that, and thanks for sharing it, mate. I think it's a brilliant reality check to some of us, though, isn't it? We only get one crack at the whip here, and some things come and some things go. And I guess it goes back to what you're talking about earlier, courage to do what's right by us. So if I were to imagine myself, this desperate need to drive and work and whatever you grind, potentially in trying to fulfill that need that's never ever going to be met until I heal that relationship with myself, then I'm going to be missing out on all the other stuff as well. So I feel incredibly privileged to be in that position that I get to take my kids to school every day. Business comes and goes, but in that sense, it's rock solid. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us, Ross. Thank you. Is that, have you gone back to do more experiences, Ross, or with ayahuasca since?
Not with ayahuasca, but I've worked with plant medicine ever since I was in my 20s. So probably what opened the door to this world was I was in my 20s. I was in South America and I worked with San Pedro, which is a cactus over there. And that gave me this complete realization that the world was connected. Had a very profound experience back then, which sort of shifted my reality, I guess, and allowed me to see things differently. So for the last 20 years, I've had the privilege to work with some amazing, psychologists and healers and shamans all over the world, whether it was with ayahuasca or San Pedro or psilocybin, 5-MeO-DMT, Cambo, variety of different plant medicines. And, all of them have had their place in, I think, helping me become who I am today.
Yeah, love it, mate. And is that something that you still have to manage or bring into your conscience, that need to continually work whilst life happens, or is it something that's a lot more immediate now for you because you've got that, you've had that insight?
It's a lot more natural now, I'd say. But I think innately as a male, there is a preconceived idea, that we are the providers, we are the rock, we are the warrior, we're the protector. And I think what comes with that is a drive to succeed and provide. And I think it's very easy as a man to get sucked into that, and that becomes your everything. I'm solution focused. I'm going to fix this problem as and when it comes up. And sometimes you get so into that, you forget what's important. To go back to what we said before, your wife, your children, your life outside of work. But it's really easy to get into that. And for me, the work that I've done with coaches, with shamans and psychologists over the years, it's made it easier to remember what's important.
Hmm. Well, what advice might you offer somebody else then who potentially finds themselves, as often quite a few of my clients are, feeling stuck, working really hard, not seeing the results, in terms of reminding themselves of what's important?
I can hand on heart say that the best thing that I do to help me is I travel often. So at least once a month, I go on what we call a holiday. Now that could be a long weekend with my wife in the UK. It might be a 3-week expedition to Alaska and anything in between. So once a month I will go away, sometimes with the whole family, sometimes with my wife, sometimes with both my kids, sometimes with one of my children, sometimes by myself. If it's, a hiking expedition or a climbing expedition, because my wife doesn't want to do that. But changing your environment, I think, is one of the most powerful things to challenge your thinking. Because when you're in the day, when you're doing the same thing every day, it feels normal. And it's very easy just to get on this treadmill where you're doing the same thing every day, and it's difficult to break out of the cycle. But when you're all of a sudden in a different place, you're walking on the beach in Belize or cycling in Mallorca or whatever floats your boat, really, it's easy to have a different perspective. So it's called hedonic calendaring. When I came across that years ago, it really, really helped me. So you've always got something to look forward to. And during that period, you get a chance to reflect and work out, why you're doing what you're doing. So whether it's a day hiking in the woods or whether it's a 2-week expedition somewhere, frequently taking yourself out of your day-to-day, I think, is one of the most helpful things anyone can do.
Yeah, I think that I love that concept as well. I prioritize at least one ride a week in the mountains on my bike. That is me playing, and I love that. It doesn't always happen, but 8 times out of 10 it will, and that gets put in my diary well ahead of time so that nothing collides or clashes with that, at least that not that it's within my control. But I think, like you've alluded to there, the important thing is it doesn't have to be a beach in Belize. That can be walking the long way home from school, drop off, or like you say, the local woods for a couple of hours. Definitely, mate. Yeah, I love that, mate. So yeah, really interesting stuff. What gave you the insight or inspiration then to set up Alphagenics, Ross?
So it was my own health that deteriorated during my 30s. I was achy, tired, but driven, and that perplexed the doctors. So I remember going to the doctors under duress. I mean, my wife had pestered me for a while to go. And I remember going to the doctors, and I just got back from climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. And I was saying, I just don't feel like myself. I'm achy, I'm tired. And I remember the doctor saying, well, there can't be anything wrong with you because you've just climbed a mountain in Africa. And I said, I think you're confusing things, because I can ignore these feelings. I have to. I'm a husband. Was I a father back then? I'm a husband. I'm a father. I'm a business owner. I can't not do those things. So I can choose to ignore the pain and continue because I have to, as a man, as a father, as a business owner. And I can choose to fulfill my goals of climbing mountains. But that doesn't change the fact there's something wrong with me. And the doctor was very dismissive, like, rubbish. You couldn't climb Mount Kilimanjaro if there's something wrong with you. And I was like, I totally disagree. Anyway, that led on to a series of blood tests where they apologised and said, oh, actually, there is something wrong with you. And your thyroid isn't working, and it hasn't worked for years. By the look of this, we find this very strange. We usually see this in grossly obese people aren't active at all, and you're climbing mountains. This is odd. That led me on to endocrinology, hormone specialists. They put me on a variety of tablets that made me feel 10 times worse. I asked for a second opinion, then a third opinion. All endocrinologists, eventually agreed that the problem was psychological, and there was nothing wrong with me. And at this point, my symptoms were the worst they'd ever been. I was achy beyond measure. I'd go to bed at night time and I'd just have this low level joint pain that would keep me awake for hours. And I'd eventually have to take medication, painkillers. And my brain fog was that bad that I remember driving home from work one day, and this was really the defining moment that ultimately led to Alphagenics. I was driving home from work one day and I gave myself a little mental test to name as many things in the car as I could. Windshield, indicator, handbrake, seat, steering wheel, all of these things. I couldn't tell you one. I was looking at the steering wheel going, I don't know what that is. I couldn't think straight. And I came home and I came in the house and I said to my wife, I don't care what the doctor said. I know my body. I've lived with it for 30 odd years. I know it better than they do, and something's not right. And she said, it doesn't matter what it takes. Like, at this point, we'd never used private healthcare in our life. We were very much in the NHS system. And we just said, it doesn't matter what it takes. It doesn't matter what it costs. We'll leave no stone unturned and we're going to find out what's wrong. Unfortunately, I found a doctor down in London, just off Harley Street, who seemed to specialise in odd things, vagary, aches, pains, people that had nowhere else to go. And I went to see him. And within an hour, he said, it's obvious what's wrong with you. You've got low testosterone. And I went, what? How has no other doctor said that? And they said, oh, well, they don't really believe in it in the NHS. They think only women can have hormone problems. I was like, wow, like, can you prove it? And he said, yeah, we'll do a blood test. If it comes back above this, I was wrong. If it comes back here to here, we can probably fix it naturally. And if it comes back below here, you need treatment. You need HRT. I was like, HRT, sort of like what middle-aged women get for menopause. He said, yeah, men can have treatment too. It's called TRT, testosterone replacement therapy. We ran the test. He was absolutely right. Within weeks, I felt like a new person. That was enough to catapult me into making better choices. So I started eating better. I started exercising again. And within months, I felt like a new man. Like, I was 35 and I felt about 85 at the beginning. And I went back to feeling 18 again. For 7 years, I had treatment from 3 different doctors because my original doctor retired. And eventually I thought, this is life-changing. And I think I can do a better job because we sold our previous business. I knew we were world-class at customer service, and I'd been exposed to this medicine that was not common knowledge. And I was like, if I combine our knowledge of customer service with this new area of medicine that very few people are talking about, very few doctors understand, we can change people's lives. So we beta tested Alphagenics back in 2021 with 10 men to make sure the service was what we thought it was going to be. And then we officially launched in January 22. So, we're almost 3 years old. And we've helped hundreds of men during that time regain their optimal self. So it came out of my own experience, really.
Yeah, what must that be like then to be knowing that there's something wrong, but be told nothing's wrong by so many people for so long, mate? I guess you'll be even beginning to believe it. Were you even beginning to believe that yourself, that it's you?
I guess at times, but as we've already talked about during this conversation, I'm quite resilient. I understand myself quite well. So looking back, I'm sure there were times when I thought, oh, well, maybe they're right. But I'm also very good at listening to my own body and listening to myself. And I knew what I was experiencing was real, because I'm a physiotherapist. I knew, for instance, my musculoskeletal symptoms weren't musculoskeletal. I knew it wasn't a ligament, it wasn't a tendon, it wasn't a muscle problem because I tested those things, and yet my joint still hurt. So I guess I was fortunate in some ways that I was able to differentially diagnose myself. I was able to say, well, it's not this, this, and this. Therefore, what can it be? And I think that probably did help me.
So what might be, can men be walking around there with low testosterone and not even really be realizing?
90% of men with low testosterone don't realize. 20% of men 15 to 39 are low. It's halved in the last 50 years because of the amount of endocrine disrupting chemicals that surround us in life now, from the foods that we eat, the pesticides that are used in there, the hormones that are in water, the toxins that are in plastic, the toxins that are in shampoo and sun cream, and they're everywhere. So 20% of men under 40 are low, 40% of men over 40 are low, and 90% probably don't realise. The difficulty and the difference between men and women's hormones problems is women's hormones change rapidly. So perimenopause generally occurs in the 40s, there or thereabouts, and symptoms will occur quickly. Mood changes, sleep changes, temperature changes, weight changes. So when that happens, you go, oh, it's probably perimenopause. In men, the change is very, very slow. So we lose 1 to 2% of our production of testosterone per year, and it can be accelerated by these endocrine disrupting chemicals, as I mentioned. Because it's a very slow decline, men slowly acclimatise to that and accept it as normal. So when you're at the point of having pretty much the same symptoms as perhaps your wife or your partner, low mood, low energy, weight gain, low libido, lack of muscle mass, poor sleep, you'd have the same symptoms, but the woman will go, it's probably perimenopause, and the man goes, I'm just getting old. It's really, really common that this happens. Now, also what complicates that is most doctors haven't heard of the andropause. It's a very nuanced area of medicine. So if men do go to the doctors, there's a commonality that they will be misdiagnosed as depressed. I feel low, I'm tired, I'm achy, I put weight on, my libido's gone, I'm just not showing up for my parent, for my kids anymore. You're probably depressed. Take some antidepressants. And what's crazy about that is nobody in the history of the world has ever been deficient in an antidepressant. But you can be deficient in testosterone. And yet doctors will not prescribe testosterone routinely, but they will dole out antidepressants left, right, and centre. So we went slightly off topic there, but yeah, men, it happens so slowly, men don't realise, I think is probably the point I wanted to make there.
Yeah, but I've got quite a few little things to bring up there, mate. I've made a note of most of those, but leading on for that, if somebody wasn't going to go to replace it or replacement therapy, then what things might they be able to do for themselves if they think they might have low testosterone in terms of their lifestyle rather than going down the medical route, do you think, Ross?
Yeah, so you can change your testosterone. You can elevate it about 20-25% by taking zinc, magnesium, vitamin D, boron, quality omega-3. Eating a paleo diet, generally the body does well with in most people. So that's, a natural diet. If it ran, swam, slithered or grew, eat it. If it's got an ingredients list on the back, probably avoid it. You'll reduce your exposure to endocrine disrupting chemicals that way, particularly if you can afford to eat organic. So, again, you're reducing your risk of exposure. The body will generally do well with that. Exercising to fatigue is really important. So, and lifting weights to fatigue or body weight exercises to fatigue, because we naturally increase testosterone production in that moment. Cardio to the point of, you can't go on actually can diminish testosterone, but weight to fatigue is different. Now, if you combine those supplements, a natural diet, exercising to fatigue with a sleep routine, so you're going to bed at the same time, you're getting up at the same time, you can maximize your testosterone. So you will naturally produce 20 to 25% more by doing those things. So if you're only slightly low, that'll boost you back into an optimal range and you'll make a big difference. If you're super low, it might make a bit of a difference, but you probably will need help. And that's where companies like Alphagenics can come in.
You've alluded that lifestyle is quite important, and I'm making the assumption that genetics will be as well. But is there anything related to stress around this, and specifically in your case as well, Ross, when you were going through all these symptoms and this start of this journey in terms of stress for you?
So stress affects obviously the adrenals and adrenal function, and that has a big correlation to sleep. Sleep is when we naturally produce testosterone. So if our sleep is affected because we're stressed, we've got a lot on our mind, then potentially, you're going to produce less testosterone in the testes when you're asleep anyway. So protecting our mental health, whether that's through, you mentioned meditation earlier, whether it's mindfulness, whether it's mindful walking, whether it's yoga, or whatever works for you, I think certainly has a role. And a study came out last year, which was quite an important one, which said that spirituality or belief in a higher power increases testosterone, which was really interesting. And the reason for that is they correlated belief in a higher power, improving psychological well-being, and psychological well-being had a direct correlation on physical well-being. And physical well-being increased physical activity, that therefore increased testosterone. So for a lot of years, a lot of the stuff we talked about today, a lot of alpha males would have been quite dismissive of, like, all that hocus pocus nonsense hippie stuff, like that's not going to affect me. It seriously can, and now we have evidence to demonstrate. Here we go, read that paper. Belief in whatever you call it can physically help your testosterone in your life.
Yeah, it's an interesting connection. It goes back to what you're talking about right at the beginning, doesn't it? What a connection that is. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Mate, I'm not going to lie. I would be a skeptic of taking something, but I guess I'm not in a position of need, or I feel or don't assume that I'm in a position of need. So my brain, and this is just for conversational purposes, but my brain goes, well, what do you do differently? And are you just trying to sell me something type of thing in terms of, testosterone and living my best life, if that.
Well, as much as possible, we try to dissuade people from testosterone Alphagenics. So, you can't just call us and say, I want to buy it. We will go through a rigorous conversation with you first to make sure it's appropriate, and we will make sure that you are optimizing your life first. So, we're big on not just selling you something. We believe, at the right time, it's transformational, but can you tweak your lifestyle first? And is it necessary? So that's a big, big thing. But the easy way to get your head around it, I guess, is, that would be like saying menopause doesn't exist and women don't need HRT. No one's going to say that, because we see it everywhere. Men and women go through puberty and our hormones change. The same happens at the other end of life as well. It just presents in a different way. So I think that's a really easy way to think about it.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough, mate. Mate, I'm going to start to wrap up fairly soon, because soon, as me mixing my words, mate. Maybe I'll give you a shout after this, because I know you've just come from one podcast onto another. So, mate, is there anything that you'd like to mention or talk about or get in here, mate, before we start to wrap it up, Ross, for today?
Do you know what? There's lots of other things we could talk about, but I think we've actually encapsulated quite a nice conversation there today. I think if we went off somewhere else now, it would open up a different conversation. So I'm quite happy to leave it there.
Awesome. Brilliant, mate. Where might people find you, mate, on different platforms or websites? Where's the best place to get in touch with you if people are interested in either mentorship or investment opportunities, or even in terms of Alphagenics and TRT? Yeah,
so my most active social media platform is LinkedIn. So just my name. You can see me there with my cap on. I'm on Instagram, Ross Tomkins 4, and my website is rosstomkins.co.uk, where you can get links to my YouTube and everything else that's out there and the different businesses that we own and operate. Alphagenics is Alphagenics with an X at the end, and you can go onto there and you can read, and listen to my story and watch videos and learn more about whether this is something that is right for you.
Brilliant. Well, Ross, mate, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for sharing a bit about your story and the work that you do, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we will speak again soon, buddy.
Definitely. Thanks, Aaron. I've really enjoyed it. Have a great day. Take care.